Thank you, madam. So after this brainstorming session of surgical management of endometriosis, we quickly move to our next session, which is equally important and I think quite challenging in day-to-day practice. That's about fertility and endometriosis. And it gives me a lot of pleasure to invite the moderator for this session, that is Dr. Sanket Prasad. We all know him as the young, dynamic, talented gynecologist endoscopic surgeon working in Mumbai, attached to various hospitals. At a very young age, he has a lot of achievements to his credit. He has devised PISAT's visual vasopressor injection needle, which is now internationally patented. And he is the proud recipient of Make in India Healthcare Innovation Award in 2018. He is the executive member of the managing council of Mumbai Obs and Gynec Society and a very favorite youth council mentor for the youth council members of the MOGS. Welcome, sir, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Garima. I hope I am audible. And
yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm going to start my screen sharing now. Could you please stop your screen sharing so that
Mr. Deepak, please stop the screen sharing.
It's fine, it's fine. Yes, so I hope my screen is visible to you now.
Yes. Yes, we can see that.
So without any delay, let's get started. First of all, I must thank AMOGS. Sorry, am I not audible?
No, you're okay. I think Prakash has to unmute.
Okay. So thank you so much to Dr. Sudha Tandon, to AMOGS, and to Dr. Nandita Palshetkar for giving us this opportunity here. And without any delay, let's get started with the panel discussion. Our panel today is on endometriosis and fertility, and we are going to take this as an evidence-based approach. But before that, I must spend a couple of minutes introducing today's panelists, because each of our panelists today is an institution in themselves. And I mean no less when I say this. So let me get started with the introduction. I would like to welcome Dr. PG Paul. Dr. PG Paul is the chairman of Paul's Hospital in Kochi, a board member of the ISGE, a member of the ASRM. He has authored 2 books, published and contributed to several chapters, but to us, when we were studying endoscopy, he was known as the teacher of teachers, who has trained more than 1,800 gynecologists all over the country and all over the world. We welcome you, Dr. PG Paul. It is an honor to be hosting you.
Thank you.
Next,
Thank you
we would like to welcome Dr. Prakash Trivedi. Dr. Prakash Trivedi, again, there is nobody who does not know the name. A pioneer in many respects, a pioneer of hysteroscopic surgery, laparoscopic suturing, in-bag morcellation, you name it. Dr. Trivedi has been at the helm of almost every important organization, the past president of IAGE, FOXY, the president of ISA 2021, scientific chair of AAGL in India, the FIGO endoscopy committee in 2015 and 18, and he is having an MUHS recognized fellowship at his hospital here in Mumbai. I must also welcome Dr. Jatin Shah, and another extremely respected name in the field of IVF, the director of the Mumbai Fertility Clinic and IVF Center, and he has been instrumental in propagating the word of IVF since the time that IVF probably started in India at several centers all over the country, in Cochin, Agra, Madurai, Pune, to all corners of the country over the past 25 years. And he has more than 500 national and international presentations, guest lectures, and I remember the crowd that assembles in the physical audience hall when Dr. Jatin Shah is speaking. So I cannot describe how much of an honor it is today to host these 3 great people under one single roof. And I do hope that I can get them to agree to disagree on some certain features, so that we will have some take-home messages that we can use in our day-to-day practice. So moving on, I would request you to, sir, focus both on when to operate and when not to operate, not just on how to operate. For ease of discussion, we will remove all other confounding factors from the pie. Patient not affording, male subfertility, endocrine imbalances, all that goes out. We are only talking about infertile patients and their approach surgically and through the IVF route. I would request the esteemed panelists to answer based on their own experience, even if I do have some slides of published evidence, the most recent one that we could find, but I would still appreciate if you could answer based on your own expertise, because a lot of times we have seen that it is your expertise which drives results, not just the results that we have got from papers. So let's start off with our first case. We have 4 separate cases that we plan to discuss today. So this a lady is a 30-year-old. She has her presenting complaint is primary infertility. She's married since 1.5 years. She has a unilateral endometriotic cyst, which is about 3 centimeters in the right ovary. She has no other pelvic symptoms. The AMH is 3, and she has never been operated before. So I'll leave just half a second to go through these points again. She's 30 years old, married recently, endometriotic cyst on one side, no other symptoms, AMH okay, 3 of 3, and never been operated before. Let's start with Dr. Jatin Shah. Sir, this patient has come to you in your OPD. First of all, sir, we would just take a yes or no answer from all 3 of you, and then we will go deeper. Dr. Jatin Shah, sir, surgery or no surgery?
If she's been trying for about 6 months or 1 year, I think you said 1.5 years infertility, and
Okay.
she's young with a normal AMH, definitely surgery would be the first line of treatment.
Okay, fine. Dr. PG Paul, sir, surgery or conservative?
I hope the male factor is normal. No?
Everything else is normal, sir.
Is normal. I will not go for surgery first.
Okay. Can you, okay, fine. Let's take Dr. Trivedi's opinion and then we'll come back to it. Dr. Trivedi, sir, what is your take?
Yeah, Jatin, she's married since 1.5 years, not infertility.
That's why I was asking.
No. And she is asymptomatic, 3 centimeter cyst, don't touch the ovary.
Okay. So we have
infertility 1.5 years or not there?
Married since 1.5 years.
Okay, let's take it. Fine. Let's take it one step further, sir. So in your opinion, let's start with you, sir, Dr. Jatin Shah again. Does the mere presence of endometriosis affect fertility rates after IVF or in patients who are trying to conceive? Or is a patient with endometriosis who is otherwise okay can still be tried for a conception without dealing with the endometrioma first? What is your take on it, sir?
No, it all depends. If she's 30, she's married for 1.5 years, and I presume she's been trying for 1.5 years because we're discussing infertility. Okay. Then I still feel that a good surgical approach would be the right thing to her, because you also want to, just seeing on ultrasound that it's just an endometrioma doesn't rule out other disease. So you have to be sure that everything inside is fine and that you can try expectant management or IUIs or whatever. I still don't feel that she's a candidate for direct IVF, because 1.5 years and 30 with AMH3 is too soon to just jump into IVF. So if she is really keen to conceive, then I think a good surgery by Donatz's technique, just a partial cystectomy and vaporization of the hilar area. And after that, maybe 3 months natural trial of conception, then 3 months of stimulated IUI. And if all that fails, then of course IVF is always.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Sir, let me start with you, Dr. PG Paul. Sir, you said you would, as in your personal opinion, not perform surgery for her directly. But with a 3 centimeter endometrioma, sir, don't you think there would be other pelvic factors that may decrease her chances of getting pregnant? And is it not a good idea to clean these up before the patient tries?
My point is, one, she has not taken any even empirical treatments. Second, this endometrioma is quite small, and always endometrioma need not cause infertility. And you may not prove that after doing surgery also she will not become pregnant that easily. So I will definitely counsel the patient. Most of my patients normally request me to try some methods like IUI or similar treatment before I embark on surgery. But if that fails, definitely I will plan for a surgery.
Okay. Dr. Trivedi, sir, would you agree with this or any difference of opinion?
One is no surgery, and it is not mentioned whether she is keen to conceive. So if she's not keen to conceive, asymptomatic 3 centimeters.
No, she is keen to conceive, sir.
She is keen to conceive. Then I think so. In endometriosis, usually the tubes are open. AMH is 3. So I will put her on a good stimulation, which may introduce a tablet like letrozole, some FSH, and then do 1 or 2 cycles of planned relation. And after that, because of the guidelines, you may consider doing IUI, which has 3 times higher results.
Okay, so we are. I think we are going towards.
So just to differ, since we're on a discussion, if you go through Donez's that big publication for such cases, he has clearly shown that if you operate, the chance of pregnancy at 6 months post surgery is more than 50%. So why would you want to put her through FSH injections, IUI, repeated visits, all those things, if a one-day surgery, which is relatively a simple surgery. Despite being an IVF specialist, I'm saying that it might be.
In fact, I had expected
Donez's article was a big eye-opener
from both of you.
Yeah, because Donez, that article is a real eye-opener, and it was a big eye-opener for me too. And I think everybody should go through it.
We are coming to that. Yeah, sir, please make a comment. We are coming to that part again.
All IVF specialists want results immediately. We surgeons are all used to wait for some time. So Jatin want immediate pregnancy. That's why he is keen.
No, I didn't. I said no, do surgery and wait 6 months.
Okay. Sir, now so let's change this case scenario just a little bit, because we are all talking about AMH. Sir, let me reduce that AMH from 3 to 2 now. And Dr. Jatin Shah, does your opinion change, or do we still go with what we said?
No, 2 is still borderline. So maybe
let me make it, sir, what is your cutoff then?
I would give her both the options still, because surgery might be a little risky. It depends on who's doing the surgery, because we don't want a further drop in the ovarian reserve. Which is the biggest concern. But that also right now is a lot of controversy, because all the publications on reduced reserve after surgery are all mostly before 2006. Those are the times when AMH was not being checked. And in 2018, we have one large publication which shows that 80 to 90% of moderate to severe endometriosis start with a low AMH. So it is not, that the surgery is causing a major drop in the AMH or the reserve, especially if it is a surgery done well. And the Donez's paper especially shows this, because he has, compared the same ovary which was operated on, the endometrioma ovary, after 6 months with the contralateral normal ovary. And he has shown that it's the same in terms of antral follicle count and ovarian volume. So there is absolutely no depletion in most of the patients, plus the 50% pregnancy rate. So we need a little bit of fine tuning there. But at 2, I agree with you. It's a little dicey, because if it drops, the patient is not going to be too happy about it. So you have the option of doing maybe 1 or 2 stimulated IUIs, then surgery, or then after 2 IUIs, you might as well proceed for IVF and just skip the surgery altogether.
Dr. Trivedi, sir, what is your cutoff? Same patient, at what cutoff level of AMH do you think that now there is no point in trying natural conception, or IUI is wasting time and I must go ahead with IVF? What is that magical number?
Now let me simplify, because I have been with Donez 3 times and Paul Debreuil, who is next to Donez. Now we have to understand it is a 3 centimeter endometrioma with a good image for 2, 3, whatever it is. Number one, there is no magical outcome of an endometriosis surgery, because say for example, she's your daughter-in-law, you'll operate now, another 5 years later, again the endometrioma will repeat, again you will operate. So it is good that Jatin is told, because PGO of me telling me is like keeping the laparoscope in the pocket and going ahead. So personally, I feel AMH, no AMH, there is no role of surgery in this patient, because tubes will be patent. You give her stimulation. You're giving just letrozole and on day 3 to day 7, and then adding some FSH. Quite a few of these patients do conceive, and the endometrioma disappears. So my point is, we don't want to rush for surgery. So this is a very long-term surgery, but that is one area. And Donez's concept was always a sandwich phenomenon. Means he went, he aspirated, that was Ivo Brosen's concept. He drained the endometrioma, then he put on depot, then he laser vaporized. So again, that is a very huge questionable concept which was there for some time. Again, he published, and Donez is a person who comes out with a lot of new drugs and new things. So I think so we have to understand any research person will always have a little bias on what they are probably at it.
Okay. So now, sir, Dr. PG Paul, sir, same patient, now we are considering an AMH of 2 and you are performing this surgery. Sir, what is your take? Cystectomy or only drainage? Remember, we are talking from getting her pregnant in the future. Do we really need to do a complete job as we would with a patient with an excellent AMH, or are we good leaving the cyst behind and just emptying out the ovary and sending her to the IVF person?
If I decide for surgery, definitely I will perform a cystectomy, but I will definitely take care of to reduce the loss. I think already the previous speakers have shown how vasopressin can be injected. You can remain very thin, and those things will be taken care of. If at all I perform, I do a cystectomy.
Okay, but sir, will the level of AMH guide you in any way that at this particular level of AMH and below, I will only do a drainage of the ovary and come out, or would you always do a careful cystectomy no matter what the AMH?
If the AMH is very low, probably less than 1.5 or nearing 1, then I will definitely tell the patient, probably I will ask them IVF patient to pick up the eggs and freeze, and then probably if symptomatic only, I will do the surgery immediately.
Okay, Dr. Jatin Shah, sir, any difference?
Can I interrupt?
Yes, sure.
Especially in patients who have repeated surgeries done, and now she's having, say, for example, bilateral endometrioma.
We have a case scenario.
And you are going to plan a ART. That is the only patient wherein you will go and you will just puncture and come out, so that the other oocytes, etc., may get a space. Just as you were mentioning, where you will draw a line.
Correct. So, sir, Dr. Trivedi, my next question to you, sir. Surface endometriosis, and we are seeing a lot of videos and papers now about complete excision and peritoneal stripping of this endometriosis for the surface lesions. For the averagely skilled surgeon, is it not sufficient enough that these deposits are fulgurated and then the patient is aggressively managed from the fertility point of view, or do all these deposits have to come out every time?
I think so. That's a very relevant question, because all the younger speaker and Tinneberg and all covered the subject very nicely. But what is happening is there is a sudden flush wherein everybody wants to do rectovaginal endometriosis. Everybody wants to do DI. When we started diabetic uterine. So suddenly they fall in love. So lots of people, while going to sleep, they dream about a DI. When they get up, so even when you are doing an ovarian endometrioma, in that also they will see a DI somewhere. Yes. So I think so over-aggressive approach of wide peritonectomy. First of all, it is not for all laparoscopic surgeons. It has to be, you graduate into that. Okay. And doing too much of extensive surgery was the root cause of it being blamed to reduce the AMH. So I think so doing an optimum surgery wherein you are removing the disease, and you don't need, as you saw that Allen Master which Harish showed and all. So those are two different compartments, because their pain element is more, and since we are focusing more on infertility, I think so optimum excision is better than radical, even if you know. If you don't know, there is no option only, because you cannot do radical.
Correct. Absolutely. Dr. PG Paul, sir, this 3 centimeter endometrioma, I don't operate on her. Should I really be worried about missing out on a malignancy and then the patient presenting with a malignancy few months later? Is that a factor that should drive me to perform a surgery even faster? What is your experience about malignancy in endometrioma?
I think in my whole experience, I have seen only 3 cases of malignancies.
I think that answers it all.
2 cases of atypias. So I don't think that is a compelling reason to do the endometriosis surgery in this.
Okay. Point noted. So I think the debate goes on. This particular excerpt is from Fertility Sterility Dialogues, and they have a huge debate on whether IVF or surgery should be the first approach. But we've covered most of that in our deliberation now. So let's talk about surgical techniques. I think this has been covered by our previous speakers, so we are not going to do it much. But let's talk about specifically point number 4, and we'll start with Dr. Jatin Shah. Sir, any experience of cyst aspiration transvaginally? Are there patients whom you do it, and how do you do it exactly?
No, I don't think there's any indication to do this for any kind of patient. So there is no question of doing cyst aspirations, thinking that you are debulking. Within a week that cyst is going to fill up again. So either you do a proper surgery or you just leave it alone.
Fantastic.
Even if you inadvertently puncture an endometrioma to take out a oocyte, nothing really happens to it. So there's enough study on that. You just have to release the foot pedal so that the negative pressure goes away. Go through the endometrioma, go into the follicle, aspirate the follicular fluid, tell the nurse to, switch the test tubes as soon as she sees the fluid clearing. And then the embryologist washes the oocyte properly, maybe do ICSI instead of IVF to remove all the cumulus wherever there are these deposits of endometriosis. And that's how it goes. So generally, there is no indication as such to tap these cysts. So I'm strongly against doing any transvaginal cyst aspirations or any type of case.
Okay. Dr. Trivedi, sir, any difference of opinion? And secondly, there are some people who are advocating that the ovary must be debulked so that the pickup is easier. So which of the two is true? Is an ovary stuck to the pouch of Douglas better for a pickup, or an ovary that is free from its adhesions in the POD? What is your take, sir?
First of all, I will be in 200% agreement with Jatin. No transvaginal aspiration at all. It's just introducing some infection, and there are many people will still add some ethanol and all. So all those is, according to me, waste of time and should not be done at all. And what was your next second part of your question?
Sir, if the ovary is stuck to the pouch of Douglas, is that good for you?
That is really very important. When the ovary is nicely stuck and there is not much of endometrium, the ovary is nicely fixed. You can do a pickup very easily. Sometimes I really fail to understand. Quite often people tell, we will do something. Because when it is, even in a frozen pelvis, when the follicles are there, Jatin will 100% agree with me. Once you see the follicles and the probe, you can just get on through the follicle, and there is no need of defreezing the adhesions. And I don't find any adhesions makes your pickup difficult. And as he rightly pointed out, if there's an endometrioma, you are very easily seeing it. Correct. So you are smart enough to do in a normal ovary, then you have gone on that side. And maybe after you have finished the pickup, that's the time when sometimes, people dare to just puncture. That also is not advisable. But what he suggested is very clear. If it is even during pickup, if you have punctured, don't worry. Embryologists are more than happy because they can identify oocyte very easily in chocolate or in fluid also.
Okay. Dr. PG Paul, sir, there are some papers suggesting that the endometrioma should be removed, but some tissue near the hilum should be left behind for fear of damaging the vascularity. Is this something that is that you would agree with?
I modify my technique. I definitely, when you come to the hilum or near the ovarian ligament, definitely if you try to excise, there is a chance that it can compromise and produce bleeding, which needs coagulation, further aggravating the loss of the tissue. But if you very specifically inject vasopressin at that point, you can clearly excise. So I basically believe in, if at all you do a surgery, it should be complete excision rather than just coagulation.
Fine. So
but sometimes, yes, surface coagulation you can do, but even diathermy heat actually can cause more damage than actual cystectomy.
Okay.
Because a recent publication which says it's not the actual ovarian tissue you remove, it's the heat energy you apply that causes the vascularity compromise is the reason why the AMH comes down.
Okay. So I think that's a point very well noted. Let's go over to the second case now. The second case, I believe, is the flavor of the day. 37 years old. She's a case of primary infertility, married since 5 years. So we assume that trying since 5 years. She has dyspareunia and painful defecation. On PV, there is a retroverted fixed uterus. On ultrasound, surprisingly, there is no ovarian endometrioma. MRI shows dense rectovaginal adhesions. The AMH is okay, 2.8. She has pain, she has complaints, but her preliminary concern is that she has to get pregnant. She says, doctor, I can wait with the pain, everything is okay. I must get pregnant as soon as possible. Otherwise, there are severe social considerations that I will have to face. Now, sir, this is the patient profile one more time. Let's start with Dr. Jatin Shah. Sir, will you operate or will you consider IVF directly?
I think the surgeons will opine better about the surgical part, but I think IVF directly would be better for
IVF directly, fine. So that's in one line.
Even if you have to operate, maybe I'll do the egg retrieval, freeze the embryos, and if the pain is really crippling or debilitating, then she goes to either Prakash or Paul gets the surgery done, then after 2-3 months I do the
fine. Coming to that, to Dr. Trivedi also, but primarily, Dr. Jatin Shah, you don't believe that operating on this patient will improve your IVF success rates. Am I correct?
Not at all. There is no indication for surgery.
Not at all. Fine. We are coming to a debate on this because there is a lot of debate on this now. Sir, Dr. Trivedi, sir, if you choose to operate and you say you must operate, how extensive does your surgery need to be? So on one hand, I am talking of removing all the disease, whatever can be seen, adhesiolysis and whatever possible. And on the other hand, a surgery where you do just as much as is required, adhesiolysis, fulguration, and give her probably a long protocol and take her for IVF. Which of these two divergent paths would you choose for this patient?
I would like to emphasize on you have to remember when you have endometriosis, you have three things in common. Endometriosis, pain, infertility, rectovaginal disease. Now, if the patient herself is not bothered about the pain element, that means her priority is conception. She's 37 years, married since 5 years. I would straightaway take her up for a good IVF cycle. And as Jatin rightly pointed out, you can freeze it, but I would rather see that she is pregnant and large number of rectovaginal endometriosis and very bad frozen pelvis. When the patient has become pregnant and when you're doing a cesarean section and when you see the backside, suddenly you find everything is gone. So number one is I won't be tempted to operate her at all. Counsel her that your interest is our interest. We have a child first. And then after that, when there is a need, because once you have delivered a child, she will be busy with the child. She'll forget all the pain. So then as such, it was not a main complaint. So just because there is a pathology, you should know. Now, the second point, what you have told is the rectovaginal part, we saw beautiful MRIs and videos and so many things. There is a zone of, I would say 30 experts in India. I'm very specific. 30 experts in India. I'm not talking 1,000 laparoscopic surgeon. 25 to 30 experts in India will do a good job for a rectovaginal nodule or that dissection. Now you have to be very clear and admit it to yourself at whatever stage you are. So when you're deciding to operate, the biggest problem earlier days, it was we never got a consent for colostomy. Now things have improved because of our relation with oncologists and our deep interest in endometriosis. There are masters of endometriosis in India. And so you will like to do from a normal tissue to abnormal tissue and dissect, clear the entire disease. If you do the surgery, do a neat, complete surgery, and preferably avoid the stapling and excising. Just on 5th June, we had 29 centimeter of rectosigmoid laparoscopically removed for malignancy which somebody else had done. So of course that was a combination with me and Sailesh Puntambekar doing at my place, and we excised that entire thing and did the stapler. So I think so keep the rectum far away and don't be too much proctologically close to the rectum in such situation.
Okay, Dr. PG Paul sir, would you agree, or is there you have a difference of opinion?
Mostly agree, because this patient is already 5 years infertility. So your endometriosis may not be the reason for her infertility. So infertility is the primary concern. She should go for IVF. And as far as the pain is concerned, she has disease. So she has two options. Either she undergoes surgery first, or first embryo freezing, and then if the pain is compelling, you may do a surgery then, or postpone the surgery depending on the patient's pain symptom relief.
Absolutely. So we are coming to that part again, but all the audience may note that all three of our experts have pointed out that primarily doing a surgery in this patient is not going to increase chances of her getting pregnant. That is also what the NHS guidelines or the NICE guidelines say, that discuss the possible impact that this laparoscopic surgery may have on her quality of life, and then see if it will alter the chance of future pregnancy or not. However, there are a lot of contradictory views and papers coming up. One of these papers is by Horace Roman in Human Reproduction, where he has studied 60 patients with DIE lesions. and said that 81% patients became pregnant after the surgery, and a staggering 59% of these conceived spontaneously just by doing the DIE surgery alone. And on the other hand, there are papers where we have, this is by the Scandinavian Journal, and they have said that there isn't too much of change in patients who have undergone surgery versus who haven't undergone surgery, particularly in DIE cases, as far as the fertility outcomes are concerned. And this, the most recent one probably, is a meta-analysis of 17 studies and more than 1,000 women, in which they found hardly any difference in the percentages, 32% versus 27% in patients who did and did not undergo surgery. So I think a lot of the evidence coincides with what all three of our experts have said about requirement from the fertility point of view.
Now, Sanket, one small point I'll tell. Many years back, a gynecologist from interior of Maharashtra, she had severe dyspareunia. She had infertility. She was keen to conceive, but that pain was so bad. So I just went ahead and we removed that rectovaginal disease. Within 4th month, she was pregnant. Now,
fantastic.
You have to get an idea if that pain is leading to severe dyspareunia, and she is in a good AMH age group. So it is the patient who decides, and it is you who decide that how much surgery you will do. But I think so all three what we agreed on, that's the right approach to move ahead.
Very well put, very well put. So sir, this next one is an open question. We are essentially talking about what publications have shown as the endometriosis fertility index, and this index asks the primary question: can we predict which patients of severe endometriosis will have fertility enhancement after surgery? Any one of you, would you like to volunteer to take up this endometriosis fertility index, and whether any of you are actually using it in your practice?
Can I?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't use the fertility index, but most of us have been practically using that issue. The history part, the age of the patient, all of us know that younger the patient, the results are better. And long-term infertility, I already just mentioned. Any patient with less than 2 years with a large endometrioma, they have a very good chance. So short-term infertility is also a good factor. And also when we do the surgery, if the fallopian tube is normal, the fimbria is normal, we know that there is a high chance. I think this fertility index actually look at this patient, this score, and how do it. I don't do formally, but we use the essence of that for counseling the patient and ourselves think about the possibility of pregnancy.
Excellent. Dr. Jatin Shah, sir, any particular comments on this?
No, I don't really follow this.
Okay, fine. So just to, yes, sir.
What I think so, if you see a running commentary, so when Virat Kohli and Tendulkar and all are scoring century, there are many commentators who have scores and statistics and data. So this scoring actually is nice to, add on to some spice to discussion. But it is eyeballing. Visually you evaluate and then you have a thing done. Scoring, as Tinneberg rightly pointed out, they don't take into consideration the deeper endometriosis. So scoring miserably fails in endometriosis.
Okay. Point noted. So we will move on. We were going to talk about the sliding sign, but I think that has been previously covered. So we are not going to go into that. We'll directly jump to case number 3. She is now 34 years old. She's been married for 6 years. She has been operated before. She had a bilateral ovarian cystectomy for endometriomas. Now the cysts have recurred and they are there on both the sides. MRI confirms the findings. AMH is low, about 1.8. And let me start with Dr. Jatin Shah, sir. Sir, how important is AMH in deciding whether this patient will require IVF or not, or given these situations, this patient should go directly for IVF, or would you like them to debulk the ovary and then you will take her for IVF?
I'm not in favor of debulking. Like even Prakash agreed earlier, you can easily do egg retrieval even with fixed ovaries. In fact, the pickup is easier with fixed ovaries than moving ovaries. So AMH is of prime concern. She is, I think, about 35 also. And repeated surgeries are just a big no-no, especially if IVF and fertility is an issue. So please avoid repeated surgeries unless, again, the same things that, she has severe pain or there is a suspicious lesion and there might be a malignancy, or all the theoretical things which are there. But
Okay.
otherwise, direct IVF is the best way to go for her. Because only a pregnancy will remove all that disease, like Prakash correctly pointed out earlier.
Fine. So going to Dr. Trivedi, sir, this new concept, fertility preservation in endometriosis, as we preserve fertility by freezing the oocytes of a lady who may undergo chemotherapy, this stimulation, pickup, freezing, and then surgery to relieve the pain, is this something that is being done routinely nowadays? And what is your take on it?
Yeah, fertility preservation and cryo is phenomenal. You know, as a endoscopist, I am in love with it. You know, the whole ART is changed by cryobiology into a different platform. So there is no difference. Now you are talking about fertility preservation, because fertility preservation is sometimes, you know, you do tracheography in cancer and still preserve fertility. Now that is different. So you are telling in endometriosis.
Yes.
So in what type of endometriosis you are telling? Because we want to preserve fertility in all patients.
So suppose it is this particular patient, sir. Let me rewind again. It is this particular patient.
What Jatin pointed out, see, this is a pitfall in laparoscopy. By pitfall, I mean, you know, it's too tempting. Just pass the 5 mm scope, don't do anything, take a monopolar, puncture and come out. You're not doing anything smart. Now, endometriosis is a disease which is actually cortical disease. So when you stimulate, the follicles which are going to form are not only in the cortex. So follicles which are going to form, which will be separate from that. So going and, you know, doing laparoscopy or transvaginal drainage, as me and Jatin and all pointed out, has no meaning. And this patient directly benefit with fertility. And I have seen hopeless bad frozen pelvis 2 to 3 times surgery done when they have succeeded. And when you do the cesarean, you are shocked that the entire pelvis is, means you can go on the backside of the uterus and everything is cleared. So I think so too much of surgery repeated is out of question.
Okay, fine. So again, continuing in IVF, if you are doing IVF for this particular patient, do you have any issues with stimulation, and does the ovary respond with an endometrioma inside it?
Yeah, so those are very two good questions. First thing is, of course, most of them start with a very low ovarian reserve, especially this type of patient. So you have to give all the stimulation which you would normally do for a poor responder, discuss testosterone pre-treatment, then your choice of agonist versus antagonist protocol, how high you want to go with your dose of FSH, whether you want to add LH. You know, so all these things will be there. Of course, fresh transfer we don't recommend in endometriosis. So freeze all is the way to go, and freeze all the embryos. If the endometrioma is unilateral and say it's more than 5 centimeters, then you will get less eggs in the ovary. It's not that you will get 0 eggs, but you will get maybe half the number of eggs you get in the contralateral normal ovary. So overall, there will be a reduction in number of eggs, both because of low AMH and by the sheer physical presence of a large endometrioma, which is why your cumulative live birth rates may not be very good, because you don't have too many embryos to freeze. So that is one concern, which applies to all poor responders. But since severe endometriosis most often have low AMH, it applies more to them. So this would be a kind of generalized approach. Of course, then you have to be more individualized as per the case.
Okay. Dr. Trivedi, sir, when you are going, when you're trying to do a pickup, we are always worried about that the follicular fluid should not get contaminated. But here we are going through and through an endometrioma. So how does that actually work?
First of all, I would, I did my first home pickup in Clermont-Ferrand in 1992, 1993. Because Salil Khandwala was there and John Pooley, he finished one ovary, and I was doing regular sonography. So personally, I find pickup is a very standardized procedure. You really can't mess up. By chance, if you are in the endometrioma, let it drain off, as Jatin rightly pointed out. It really doesn't cause much of difficulty. I want to share one important point, because me, Jatin, Paul, Pratap, and all of us were together. And there was a very important thing about inflammation, what Pratap has pointed out. And see, all of us know that the blood goes inside and gets deposited. But what important point he told is that it is iron sequestration which takes place in the macrophage. And the macrophage is overfull with ferritin. So in trying to reduce the impact of iron, it produces more of hydrogen peroxide ion and superoxides. So these are the things which leads to reactive oxygen species, which leads to fibrosis, which leads to reduction in the cortex of the stroma, which leads to smooth muscle metaplasia, and also microvascularity is reduced. That is how the ovarian follicle is affected, both in terms of maturation, in terms of number, and if there is use for fertilization, for IVM, it doesn't work. If used, as Jatin rightly pointed out, you may have lesser number, obviously, higher dose, and it still can have problem in terms of implantation, fertilization. And one more thing which I always believe, that blastocyst, ixion blastocyst in all these endometriosis is preferred, because blastocyst formation rate in endometriosis IVF is also less.
Fine, fine. Noted, sir. So we were going to talk about the place of MRI, but I think Abhishek has covered it very well.
Good.
And also we are a little short of time. So we are going to directly jump to the fourth case. And there is no particular case scenario, but let me start with Dr. PG Paul, sir. We are looking at a patient who is trying to conceive, and she has come to you. Let's take, there are two separate patients, and one of them has a 3 or a 4 centimeter focal adenomyosis, and the other one has a uterus with a diffuse adenomyosis. Are any of these two patients good candidates for performing surgery as far as the reproductive outcome is going in the long term? Or would it just be prudent to do an IVF and try and get them pregnant quicker?
Localized adenomyosis, symptomatic ones especially, are amenable to surgical correction, comparatively easier with good results. I don't have a proper data on this, but a lot of anecdotal, my own experience and those who have referred from IVF centers, we had good results with the localized adenomyosis excision. Generalized one, we find it very difficult. We never do this Osada's technique. If it can be done, probably it can. We had few cases where the uterus has become 16 weeks, generalized, we cannot do anything, but we have temporarily done some amount of cytoreduction, but those cases were not really good. The localized ones, symptomatic, are the one which we normally operate.
Okay, so sir, continuing with you with the same question, how much to remove? Because there's always more and more and more. So how much do you remove and where do you stop? Any surgical tips before we move on to the...
Yes, one thing is when we do the ultrasonography yourself, you find out how thickness it is and what is your, how much you can extend. So during the incision itself, you measure the depth after making the incision and then you decide that's the depth. If you have any difficulty, you want to really identify, you can do a hysteroscopy simultaneously and transilluminate to see the endometrium you are close. And then you keep around half centimeter of serosal myometrium. The same thing onto the mucosal side. We try to excise. The incisions are either vertical or transverse, or sometimes a T-shaped or H-shaped. Rarely we have done in certain cases.
Okay. Dr. Trivedi, sir, moving on to you, one extension of this surgical technique question. Go up till the endometrium and excise the whole thing by risking opening the endometrium, or stay a little short of the endometrium and risk leaving a little bit behind?
I think so. It's a very important question, and we have, as Paul rightly pointed out, localized adenomyosis, even prior to IVF, failed IVF, there are good successes. There is a golden rule. If you have a 7 centimeter endometrium or 6 centimeter, leave 0.75 centimeter on the serosal side, 0.75 centimeter on the endometrial side. Don't open the endometrial cavity, because that is what, and then you keep a hood so that your suturing becomes possible and easy. Once you are in a good plane, you are, of course, you sometimes you Caesar. You have to always remember that you have to suture it back. So you will remove 75% of the disease, but that is quite useful. And then when there, especially IVF or something is done, then you have down regulation. Generalized adenomyoma, it is, you give couple of months down regulation. Irrespective of what you do, the fertility rates are less, and most important, 50 to 67% abortion rate will be there in a patient which is having generalized adenomyosis.
Fabulous.
So there is some limitation which will always take place. And cytoreductive surgery, there are a lot of data of open surgery, OSADA and Beta Day and this and that and all. They are nice to see in books. But in reality, in fact, I remember last time Sanjay was there. So he was mentioning a slicing technique. So they go on slicing till they find it is comfortable. But then these are all anecdotal people who have referral work and a lot of bulk of cases.
Understood. So, sir, moving on to Dr. Jatin Shah. Sir, pre-operative GnRH agonist to shrink the tumor and then operate, or you would like them to operate and then you would give GnRH agonist and then continue it for the stimulation later on?
No, I think the surgeons can answer that better because it's on an individualized basis.
Okay. Sir, then if you had to choose a compound, leuprolide, Zoladex, Decapeptyl, any difference in all these in terms of results?
No, more or less they're similar, but each one has a different duration in number of days. Like leuprolide acts for 21 days, Zoladex acts for 35 days. So accordingly, it has to be programmed and given. But right now, the Cochrane analysis of 2018 says that 3 months of pretreatment doesn't improve IVF outcomes. So it's all in a gray zone again.
Okay. So moving that question back to Dr. PG Paul, sir, pre-operative GnRH agonist or post-operative after you've removed what you can?
For the endometriosis?
For the adenomyoma.
I normally don't give before or after unless there is a reason.
Okay. Not even for suppression of the little bit that may have been left behind.
How long we can give? So I personally don't give it pre-operatively or post-operatively unless for symptom relief temporarily I may give it.
Noted. Sir, Trivedi sir, any difference of opinion?
See, pre-op, the big answer is don't give because fibroid, it messes. Okay. Adenomyosis, as such, you want some more tissue because whenever you remove, you feel, oh, I have removed only 4 or 5 centimeters because the disease was 6-7 centimeters. Depot, if at all it is, because you don't want the patient to conceive within 3 to 6 months because healing of adenomyosis is totally different from myomectomy.
Absolutely.
So you want that time, so you will give depot after surgery and refer or do the best IVF. Again, I'm trying to tell you, even if you know IVF, if you feel somebody else is going to give a better result, then you have to refer there, or in the same happens in terms of surgery. If somebody can do a better surgery, you can always work.
So moving on to recurrence rates, Dr. PG Paul sir, in your expertise, how many of these patients of focal adenomyosis, let's say you operated on 100 patients, what should your preoperative counseling say? How many of them can actually come back to you with a mass that is of the same size or larger, and in how much time?
No, I didn't follow that.
Sir, is there any recurrence rate after you have removed all that you can while the patient is still undergoing fertility treatment? And how much is this in your opinion?
As far as the symptoms, normally the symptoms are comparatively reduced, even though it does not disappear completely. And usually the recurrence of symptoms happens around 1.5 to 2 years. But before that, normally we ask them to undergo IVF or similar treatment if they don't conceive spontaneously.
What about recurrence of the mass per se, sir?
More than the mass, I find the symptoms are more in some patients.
Okay.
The mass recurrence is not that that great.
Yes, Sanket, there's very clear and important answer to this. Localized adenomyoma, if you have resected and if the patient gets desired result like pregnancy, that's fine. If they don't get desired result, you don't have to bother because she's not going to follow it to you. But I would say few patients wherein there is violent recurrence. You have done an adenomyoma recurrence surgery, and within 6 months, you have done a good surgery, superb surgery, and there is a fulminant recurrence. And many of the time, though a lot of people told about nerves and all, there are many wherein I have done presacral neurectomy, and none of these patients have any bladder problem. We have done pre-sequel for teenagers with dysmenorrhea. Not that we promote that, but what I'm trying to tell is there are some group of adenomyosis which have violent, because they get the injury of surgery is an insult, and it really flourishes too much.
Okay. Sir, Dr. Jatin Shah, IVF success rates in adenomyoma patients, how bad is it in terms of success rates compared to a patient who does not have this disease?
Yeah, so definitely there is a reduction in the live birth rates with severe adenomyosis. And the more diffuse the disease, the greater is the problem. So there are some interesting studies where they see the junctional zone, thickness. And if that thickness is, say, more than 7 mm, your IVF results go down from, say, 60% to just about 26%. And if it is more than 10 mm, it goes down to just 10%. So that is a good guide if you see the junctional zone on 3D ultrasound or MRI, which helps you to decide. And also surgery, of course, Prakash covered it very well. So what you need to do is leave behind at least 15 mm, 1.5 centimeter. Like he said, 7.5, so 1.5 total. You must leave behind. Otherwise, there are 2 studies, both of around 30 cases, where they reported 2 or 3 rupture uterus, in the mid trimester, second trimester. So you have to be careful about that. But overall, of course, with moderate to severe adenomyosis, pregnancy rates are lower. Miscarriage rates, like Prakash said, shoot up from 20% to almost 50-60%. So these are 2 harsh realities, and a lot of these patients finally end up with gestational surrogacy. So it's a very important point that you brought out here.
Fine. I think you've answered the last question again, but any long-term obstetric outcomes, sir, in operated patients, particularly I am asking in terms of dehiscence of the operated area. Dr.
Rupture is a clear and present danger. So that's what I said. It's very important that you leave behind, the books say 9 to 15 mm, but I think around 1.5 centimeters should be ideal.
Sanket, there is a very important study which evaluates once you have done adenomyoma excision. Why I was telling 3 to 6 months? Because it studies the regeneration of vascularity in the scar area. Now what happens? There are 3 responses. One is fibrotic. If it is fibrotic, it doesn't allow the growth factor to grow properly. So those are the cases wherein there will be more chances of rupture uterus. That is point number 1. Obviously, opening of the cavity is not a good idea at all. Last and not the least, you have to remember you have done a posterior adenomyomectomy, and I had this first-hand experience. After I delivered the child, when I delivered the placenta, my posterior hole was bigger than anterior hole. So it was placenta, increta, pancreta. So when we removed it, so the posterior part was, so you have very high chance of placenta, increta, and those things. So you have to keep that in mind and not leave your cesarean to somebody, Of course, now the younger people are more experienced in handling everything, but that is not a surprise you find in adenomyosis.
Right. So I think that brings us to the, so there is one more slide. Recurrence and waiting time. I think Dr. Trivedi sir has already touched upon this, and with complete excision, we have less recurrences and a waiting time of at least 3 months to 6 months before the patient is asked to conceive. So I think we have reached the end of the presentation. If there is any point that the 3 of you feel has not been covered, sir, please feel free to point it out in the discussion right now, or otherwise then we can open it to questions from the audience to all 3 of you.
One comment.
Yes, sir.
It's actually not a case of aspiration of the endometrioma. Maybe incomplete surgery for the endometrioma. I had a few cases of ovarian abscess presenting after some time. So ovarian endometrioma, just drain it and it may not be as effective, and it has complications like ovarian abscess. Occasionally, it actually presents like an endometrioma when the patient comes to us, but because of her symptoms and occasional history of fever and all, guide you that it can be an ovarian abscess. Because ultrasonography, it's not very easy to identify this unless you suspect.
Noted.
Sanket, most important thing is you conducted the panel very efficiently.
Thank you, sir.
Scientifically, all 3 of us were remaining very well behaved.
Thank you so much.
Perfect timing.
Which we normally are, but it was well conducted.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanket.
Thank you, Sudha, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Sudha.
Thank you very much, Sanket. You have done a wonderful job. And as Dr. Trivedi rightly said, I think only you have the capability of doing this excellent job, balancing the three stalwarts that we had. So thank you, Sanket, very much. I think you have covered lots and lots of things in fertility issues and endometriosis, and which would have of real benefit. And I must thank Dr. PG Paul, Dr. Trivedi, and Dr. Jatin Shah, who have been very frank in their opinion, and I'm sure all their opinions would be remembered and would be very, very helpful to all the patients of endometriosis. I really thank three of you all from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, sirs. It's been an honor.
You did a great job, like Sudha's push-up and Sudha's energy of doing new thing always remains, and we thank AMOX, all three of us, and everybody who has participated. Sudha, great work.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.